Okay, Jeff, we are streaming live on YouTube. You can commence the meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening, members of council that are in attendance, staff, the applicant, agent, developer, and members of the public. My name is Jeff Medeiros. I'm a senior planner with the City of Brantford, and we're here to have an informal meeting. It's a virtual neighborhood meeting. It's specifically to talk about a zoning bylaw amendment application, PZ 1721, and it applies for 4 separate parcels of land, and we'll talk a little bit about that project throughout this presentation. So just to kind of give a bit of an overview of the agenda for this evening, so we'll start with introductions, introduce the councilors and attendance staff, the applicant team and the owners team, and then go into a bit of an overview of the planning policies and process, and then a discussion and presentation on behalf of the applicant and agent, and then there'll be opportunities for members of the public to ask questions. So we are scheduled for the full 2 hours, may not be the full 2 hours, but we are scheduled for that time frame for this evening. So there'll be plenty of opportunities to speak with respect to this project. So just to go through the councilors in attendance, I don't believe Councillor McCreer is in the meeting at the moment, but Ward 3, which this project falls within, we have Councillor Martin in attendance of the meeting. We also have Ward 4 councillors, and for those that don't know, this property or the properties along West Street, actually West Street in general, is the dividing line between the 2 wards, being Ward 3 and 4. So in attendance, we also have Councillor Carpenter and Councillor Antosky for Ward 4. I've already introduced myself. I'm the planner on the file. We also have Casey Pongrass, who's a senior planner at the city. She's in the background taking notes, minutes, which are being recorded on YouTube, obviously, and then we will have minutes available to members of the public within a few weeks' time after the meeting. And then we also have some support in the background for folks that can't see, Darlene, Barb, and Reza. They're doing the magic in the background in terms of streaming this this presentation. And then I'll leave the introductions first for the consultant team. I think I captured everyone in the introduction slide here, but perhaps Nancy, you can introduce your team when your time is up to present. So before we begin, perhaps maybe Councillor Martin or any of the Ward 4 councillors, if you do want to maybe introduce yourself and speak, I think now is probably an appropriate time to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you to everyone who's signed on to this meeting. It's going to be a good opportunity for the staff and the proponent to present what it is that is going on here. Hopefully it'll answer all the questions people have. If it doesn't, there will be time for questions afterwards. And if you're watching on YouTube, you're not logged into the meeting and you want to ask a question, email it to me and I'll ask it on your behalf. So with that, hopefully we'll have a good meeting and let's go.
Great. Thanks to Councillor Martin. Councillor Carpenter, is there anything you want to speak or say before we proceed?
I just said if you're across the street on the east side of West Street, you can contact Councillor Antosky and I with any concerns you have, so we can bring them forward as it comes to planning. And the province to put out new planning recommendations. If you would like a copy of those, email me and I'll send you the package.
Great, thank you, Councillor Carpenter. Okay, let's jump right into it. So, planning overview. So most of the discussion that I'm going to be conveying right now really stems from what the current policies are and why we're here. So, why we're here. So the city's received a zoning bylaw amendment application, and so for those that received the notice, that's part of the public process with the zoning bylaw amendment. There is going to be another meeting beyond this one. It may even be 2. This is really the first, I guess, kickoff in terms of a public meeting. There is a statutory public meeting that would be in front of City Council at a later date. And there may be, at the discretion of the ward councilors, perhaps a second neighborhood meeting. And that really depends on what sort of feedback comes from city staff with the submission, as well as members of the public, and perhaps if there's any changes made to the plan. So there may be, there's going to be a minimum of one more public meeting. There may be opportunities for future ones as well. In addition to that, too, as the councilors alluded to, staff are here. We're listening. If there's any comments that folks may have that you may not want to present in a face-to-face meeting, if you want to convey anything in writing through email, I'm more than happy to convey any information to the developers team, and any comments that are received by the city form part of the public record, and they will form part of staff's analysis with bringing this project forward. So that's kind of the planning overview, high-level overview in terms of the next steps in the process. So just to go back into the project context, for those who don't know, so the property or subject properties actually consist of 4 separate parcels. They have their civic addresses. One actually is a Charing Cross address. This property doesn't front on Charing Cross. The majority of the frontage is along Galileo Boulevard. And then there's 2 parcels of land that also front West Street. The majority of the property, though, or the larger portion of the property obviously is along Galileo, with a landlocked parcel that's behind the balance of those lands. In terms of the composition of the neighborhood, Charing Cross, an arterial road, collector road, in terms of its context, commercial uses, for the most part, in this particular area too, Galileo, predominantly residential. There's a commercial plaza that abuts this property, a number of single family homes as well. And then along the West Street corridor, you do get a mix of uses: commercial, residential, multi-unit. You actually even get some industry further north along West Street. So from the policy standpoint, so for those folks that don't know, the city approved a new official plan back in 2021, and it was ultimately adopted by the province back in August of 2021. And that has changed the land use designations citywide for majority of properties. So under the new official plan, this property for the most part is designated intensification corridor designation. There are specific policies within the official plan that speak to those sort of land uses that would be permitted in that designation. And then the small portion is a parks and open space designation. And you can sort of see that is just to the northwest of the site. And that really is reflective of a former road allowance along Galileo Boulevard. Most of the development obviously falls within the majority of the intensification corridor designation. So I'm not going to go into the specifics of the proposal. The applicant will do that. But in terms of the land use designation and the permission, so the uses that are being proposed today are permitted in the intensification corridor designation. So what that basically means is no amendments to the official plan are proposed as part of this proposal. The only part that's being proposed is the amendment to the zoning bylaw, which I'll speak to next. And just one little component that I just want to hone in on for those that are not aware, it's actually a schedule in the official plan policy. The majority of this site falls within a Category 1 landfill, and it's reflective of historical uses that are there. And then within the official plan, there's policies that speak to, what you do with those sort of land uses and the remediation work that's required. And a lot of the studies and reports that have been submitted to the city, and for folks that have reviewed those, you would see that there's detailed environmental reports and engineering reports that would look at that sort of land use. So moving along to jump into the zoning bylaw, property has a number of zones associated with it. There's a holding or an H-R4A zone. You might wonder what that is. That's a medium density zone. The uses that are permitted in that zone are predominantly townhouses for the most part. And then the balance of the properties, specifically the ones that front on West Street, R1B and an R1B1 zone. The R1B1 zone is specific to that property that has a former mechanic garage, and that's what the zoning bylaw is reflective of. Those 2 zones permit, for the most part, single family homes. So as you're probably aware, the applicant has submitted a zoning bylaw amendment, and the idea or the intent of that proposal is to rezone the site to allow for apartment buildings, and they're proposing to do a site-specific RHD zone, high density residential zone, site-specific. And the site-specific is to recognize some of the provisions that they're looking at, whether it be building height, parking, setbacks, things like that. And that forms the basis of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. So,
sorry, Jeff, it's Casey.
Yes.
Your PowerPoint isn't moving, so we're still on the first page.
oh, thank you. Sorry about that. How about now?
Okay. Now we're moving. Yep.
Okay.
Thanks, Casey. I was just going to interrupt. The same thing.
He's a fast talker. I couldn't get a word in edgewise.
Oh,
I know, I was waiting as well.
Sorry about that. My bad. Okay, so location map. I spoke to the context of the neighborhood. Also spoke to the OP. So this is the land use schedule that I was speaking to in the official plan, and then just a schedule in the zoning bylaw. So if these are maps that are produced by the city, if members of the public want copies of any of this information, I can definitely provide that. And I apologize. I was not aware that my screen was frozen. So that is it for me on the presentation side of things. So perhaps we can move along to Nancy and your team, and perhaps you can introduce your team and start with your presentation. So thank you everyone for listening to me.
Oh, so good evening, members of council, city staff, and members of the public. My name is Nancy Friday. I'm a senior planner with GSP Group, and I'm here representing the owners of the land this evening, and we'll give you a bit more information about the redevelopment proposal. The first slide I have is also showing the outline of the properties, and Jeff spoke to the 4 individual properties that this redevelopment plan encompasses. And we have 352 and 354 West Street and 69 Galileo Boulevard and 190 and behind Charing Cross, and a small piece of the city-owned right-of-way called Bertrand Place, as it will be acquired by the owner and will be part of this redevelopment proposal, and will provide the access from Galileo Boulevard into the site. Can I move the slides, or does someone else do that?
I can move them. If you just want to just let me know when you want me to move the slides, I can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. So next slide, please, Jeff. So we put this site context a slide in, and it was in our planning justification report, and I think it just kind of orientates everyone to the site with the Grand River to the south, downtown Brantford, moving up West Street, and you can see the subject site outlined in red there. Next slide, please. And the neighborhood community context. Again, you can see a lot of labels on this map of the area, and the area outlined in red. And I think the point of this slide is to say that the subject lands are part of a strategic growth area that the new approved Brantford official plan has designated for certain areas within the city where they would like to see some additional growth and where they'd like to see some intensification. And with intensification, of course, you have additional residents, and you want to ensure that the facilities are available in the community, such as parks and churches and hospitals and transit. And I think this slide just is meant to illustrate that there are a number of community facilities in the area that can serve the proposed redevelopment. Next slide, please. We talk about transit, about needing transit in high density areas for those who don't have vehicles and would need to get to work or get to where they want to go on the bus. So this is illustrating that there are 3 transit routes that service the site, 2, 13, and 15, and they're outlined in the various colors there on this slide. And there is at the end of Galileo and at West Street. There's a transit stop there. And I just wanted to introduce here that the owner has agreed to upgrade that transit stop at West and Galileo as part of this redevelopment plan. Next slide, please. So this is the overall site plan that was prepared by the architect. And I didn't introduce our team. I think that's what I forgot to do, correct? But I don't know if Shem is here, but Shem is with KNY&H, a architectural firm in Burlington, and they prepared the site plan that you see before you. The two owners are on this neighborhood meeting as well, being, well, I think three perhaps. So we have Michael Hendry, we have Daniel Bragignola, and Frank Bragignola. They are in attendance as well. And so sorry about that, but beside myself, those people are in attendance and there may be questions of those people later on. So this is the overall development showing the site, showing the 3 apartment buildings in blue. And basically they're all 7, 8 stories. The building in the middle, building 2, could be argued at 7 or 8 stories, but certainly no taller than 8 stories. And building 1 and building 2 are 7-story buildings. So the overall plan is that this will be a upscale rental redevelopment. The owner has indicated that there could be a small component that would be affordable within the building for sort of a mid-income level household that could afford a unit in this proposal. So the total units are 408. Those are distributed across the 3 buildings. 449 parking spaces. We have a combination of underground parking and surface parking to accommodate the need. The overall parking rate is 1.1 spaces per unit. The bylaw does require 1.5. However, in the higher density strategic growth areas with transit, it's been demonstrated that this rate of 1.1 can meet the demand or the need for parking. And also there's a number of indoor, outdoor amenity areas planned. The trees will be retained as much as possible around the perimeter of the site that are existing today as part of the ridge that exists there, and the number of trees around the north and the northwest portion of the site. And as I said, there will be bicycle parking, vehicle parking, and bicycle parking provided as well. That is basically the overview of this 3-building redevelopment. Next slide, please. We noted that there was a few comments that we were given for emails from members of the public, and we noted an overwhelming theme in terms of some transportation concerns that have been raised, traffic or transportation concerns raised by the public. So we just wanted to say at this point that as part of this redevelopment, they had the owners had to prepare a transportation impact study. It was submitted to the city and is under review at the moment. This traffic impact study, it looks at the existing traffic in the area without this new proposal. And it looks at the traffic that would be generated from the new development, and it looks at background future traffic. And those issues all come into play when whether or not the land and the transportation network can support this development. And the overall conclusion is yes, the transportation network can accommodate this additional development. I have included just a picture here of the West Street access. The main access is from Galileo, but this is a secondary access and could be an emergency access if the Galileo driveway is blocked for some reason. And it is a right in, right out only access. There was some concern that perhaps it was a little too close to the intersection of Charing Cross and West Street. But so the city did ask us to do what they call a site distance assessment to ensure that those people and vehicles turning right out of the site can look and clearly see whether oncoming cars are coming their way and they can safely turn right. So that assessment was done, and the requirements are met. The 3 study area intersections. Now the 3 study area intersections are basically West and Galileo, and then the intersection of the site accesses to West and Galileo. Those are the 3 intersections they talk about in the traffic study. And based on the analysis of existing and future traffic, they are forecast to operate at acceptable levels. And all the detailed technical analysis is based on documents and Transportation Canada, or I think it's called TAC assessments. So that's all very detailed, but generally speaking, it comes out that it can operate at acceptable levels. And like I said, the parking supply is intended to accommodate the demand, and that's what the 1.1 per unit is based on. Next slide, please. As part of the submission of the rezoning application, it was advised that we also show a proposed landscape plan. Now, this is a preliminary plan, a conceptual plan at this point. When the zoning is approved and a redevelopment occurs, there'll be a site plan application. And at that time, more detailed landscaping will be shown on the detailed landscape plan. But basically, I think I've already spoken to this. The idea is to retain the perimeter trees as much as possible, have sidewalks throughout the site that can carry pedestrians from West to Galileo or through the site any which way you want to go. And there's islands in between the little parking areas to allow for some plantings and some trees. And along Galileo, you can see the trees that are planted there be sort of a municipal boulevard tree to provide attractiveness and screening for those people that live on the south side of Galileo Boulevard. Next slide, please. So the owners had some concepts, some renderings prepared to place these 3D buildings on the site so you can get an idea of how it will look or how it appears once these 3 buildings have been built. So this shows us the commercial plaza that's at the corner of Galileo and West Street and the 3 buildings. The building 3, Galileo, building 2 moving in, and building 1 closer to Charing Cross. Building 1 appears to be a bit higher, even though it is lower than building 2, but that's based on basically the elevations of the property. They are higher where building 1 is, and they drop towards Galileo. And there is quite a significant drop, a gradual transition across the site of about, I think it was about 15 meters in total. So that's all been accommodated for and taken into consideration with the design of the site, the servicing and grading, and the stormwater management. Next slide, please. Again, just looking at the same perspective, same rendering from a different perspective to show the buildings on the site. It's not completely accurate in terms of the internal site design of the driveways or the parking. It's just showing basically the massing of the buildings and where they'll be located on the site. Next slide, please. So I just want to conclude, give the public an opportunity to ask the questions. So as Jeff pointed out at the beginning, this is a rezoning application, and it is It is medium density and low density right now, and it's proposal to go to residential high density zone with some site specific modifications. The RHD zone itself allows up to 12 stories, and so we will be capping that at the 8 stories based on this specific development proposal. There's a couple of other very minor modifications to some of the parent regulations that are required, primarily based on the configuration of the site itself. And those are, like I say, very minor in nature, one of them being the parking from 1.5 to 1.1. As I said at the beginning, this is planned as an upscale rental building. Some of the public wanted to know if they would be rental or condominium. There will be rental. There will be a number of amenities though for the residents, and like I said, a small component of affordable housing, and that's in terms of a mid-level income household, not subsidized housing. But again, we are talking about the main access is Galileo, and it's right in and right out only on West Street. I think we've covered most of the basic elements of the plan, and we would be very pleased to answer any specific questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. I think, so I guess before we begin, I see that there's a few more individuals that are listed as panelists as Darlene Lombardi. If you haven't done so already, could you just please identify yourself, just change your name, and in Zoom, we just want to make sure you're either a panelist, either you're representing the developer owner or city staff or a member of council, or you're a member of the public that has an interest and wants to speak, and there'll also be an opportunity for that. So I think for the purpose of before getting into the public comments, perhaps I'm going to leave up, I think, the site plan. I think that's probably a good discussion point because it's a good way to sort of navigate, what people are referring to in terms of the site. But before we begin, perhaps maybe Councillor Martin or Councillor Carpenter and Toski, if there's any questions you may have. If not, then perhaps we can jump right into public questions.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. It'd be interesting to hear what kind of questions the public have and the responses to that.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you.
I still have the same concern as before. I know it's a right in, right out off of West Street, and just the right in is more concerning about someone being rear-ended. I know you got it as a minor arterial, but it's pretty busy street, and coming over that crest that hill, cars are moving pretty good clip. Just a comment.
Thanks for that, Councillor Carpenter. Okay, then perhaps Darlene, maybe you can bring in some of the members of the public, and they'll have their opportunity to ask away.
Great, thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
We have 6 attendees that have joined us in tonight's meeting. Susan, if you'd like to go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can, Susan. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Ooh, sorry, there was feedback there. My questions don't pertain generally to the zoning. I understand the overall plan. I understand the potential for the development within that area. There isn't anything that we can do as owners regarding the rezoning. We absolutely, I know, I cannot speak for all owners because I am not, I do not represent them. I represent myself. And we absolutely do welcome development within Brantford. Absolutely. So thank you for that and welcome. My concerns relate specifically to, well, one is the noise feasibility study. And there were, as in all architectural and structural drawings, there are conflicts and or in conceptual drawings and renderings. My first question relates specifically to drawing A001, which is the site plan revision number 2 dated December the 9th, September the 20th, 2021. And also plan A230 relating to building 3 in the underground, and specifically relating to the exhaust fans in the air shaft locations. Now, these plans indicate that 2 air shafts and exhaust fans will be located at both the east and west location of building 3 along Galileo. And within the noise feasibility study, that just related specifically to the development and not the impact on the neighborhood. We do have major arterial roads, which are Charing Cross and West. And I do agree with Councillor Carpenter that West Street is a major arterial road. And there are concerns from some neighbors regarding that entrance, but getting back to my point, will the developer install noise reducing wall baffles in those areas, and or are no noise reducing baffles required because they were not referenced within that feasibility study?
I think I can, I don't know, I believe we have the architect on in the meeting. But I think the air vents or the air shafts are to provide air into and out of the underground parking area. Based on my experience, they don't emit an exhaust per se, and they don't have a particular noise associated with them. But I would certainly ask Shem to expand on that if he's available to do so.
So just to interject here, I see that Shem is listed as an attendee. Darlene, could you bring, he might have actually called in twice because I see his last name twice. Could you bring in Shem as a panelist, please?
No problem, Jeff.
Thank you.
I think he's having some microphone issues, if that's.
Perhaps if we can't get Shem live, then we can certainly take that question back and ensure that we comprehensively answer it for Susan, because I think it's a relevant question for the neighbors, and we can certainly take that back and provide a more detailed, thorough answer through email or through you, Jeff, if that's advisable.
Yeah, I think either option, I'm fine with either option. And obviously if we were in, Susan, as I said to you earlier, if we're not able to answer everything tonight, we will follow up with your emails. Just want you to be aware of that. So
Jeff,
yes,
I have promoted him. I'm working with him. I think he's having microphone difficulties.
Okay, maybe perhaps we can come back to some of those architectural related questions afterwards if we're able to get Shem online, if that's okay. Maybe we can move, Susan, perhaps you can move to your next question, because I know you had a list you had sent by email as well.
Yeah, I have 12 questions.
Okay, so please proceed.
And just relating to my question one, Nancy, I just want to respectfully not agree with you relating to the noise regarding the exhaust. So and so that is a concern directly for the owners that are located on the south side of Galileo in reference to building 3. Question number 2 related to the plantings. I understand that the plantings along the frontage of building 3, and there were discrepancies where it indicated it was an open plan. Renderings indicated that there were trees. I guess it's not something that you are able to answer now. However, if there is something within the city bylaws relating to landscape aesthetics along the frontage of high density, I guess, towers, that I would like to know. Trees would be preferable.
Jeff, would you like me to answer that? Like as best I can. I can say that the city has urban design guidelines and they have site plan guidelines, and those all come into play at the site plan stage. We're not there yet, but we will get there. And it is important for the developer to show what's planned to be planted for aesthetics and for some kind of screening purposes. So I know this particular slide that's up now doesn't show any plantings, and it isn't meant to really show any landscaping, just the footprint of the buildings and the site circulation. But yes, so I mean, this will be refined. I think it's important that, you know, this is a first blush at what the developer, the owners would like to see in regard to landscaping. And so there may be specific requirements regarding the planting of trees along the boulevards, and perhaps the city staff could expand upon that. But I believe that would be a requirement.
Thanks for that, Nancy. So yeah, so just to kind of build on to Nancy's response, she's right as far as landscaping. I mean, typically the detailed design aspects of landscaping usually get looked at the site plan control stage. That doesn't necessarily preclude a developer from submitting a landscape plan at the rezoning stage, and you know, perhaps that could be investigated a bit more. But in terms of actually approving ultimately what the landscaping composition is going to be there, that usually gets addressed at the site plan stage. And usually, like with landscape plans, there's tree inventories that's required. There's tree preservation plans that need to be looked at. There's replacement ratios that most municipalities follow in terms of tree replacements. A lot of that level of detail doesn't really come through at a rezoning stage, but you know, we are hearing you loud and clear. I mean, landscaping is a significant component of the development review process, and like I said, typically it's a bit more refined at the site plan control stage.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I move on to my question number 3?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so if we reference, it's another architectural drawing question. If we reference drawing A43 for building 3, elevations revision 2 dated September 3rd, 2021, and specifically elevation 2 A430 south elevation between grid lines 22 and 23. At that first level, it's really unclear as to what is shown. My concern is whether that was some sort of a ramp, because I know at the backside of building 3 there is a ramp there, or if it was some sort of a vehicle egress, an overhead door. It was confusing, or if it was a walkway.
Yes, do we have the drawings that are being referenced available on this or not?
Not on the presentation, Councillor. Okay. So I see that Shem has called in, the architect. Perhaps it might be better suited for him to speak to some of the specifics regarding the architectural plans.
Yes, it's Shem here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So this is regarding building 3, I understand. And there's a ramp that is on the east side of the building. And is that what the question is concerning?
No, there should not be a ramp on the east side of the building. So it is drawing A43, building 3, and building 3 elevations. It is on the west side between grid lines 22 and 23. And it's building elevation, buildings, the detail 2A430 south elevation, which fronts along Galileo.
Right now.
I do have the
Wow.
drawing up on my second screen, but I don't know if I can share that.
Darlene, could you perhaps give Nancy permissions to share her screen?
Will do.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the only doors that we are showing there would be anything that has to do with exiting egress. This is again, building 3, grid line 22.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's a man door. It looks large enough to be an overhead door of some type. So my question is what is shown and what is the intent for that area?
Okay, I'm just looking at it really quickly, and I'll, if possible, I'll respond via chat, and that way I can give you a more concise and more accurate answer at the same time.
Okay, no problem.
So maybe perhaps, Susan, a lot of the questions I know you had are very specific to the plans, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think just, the interest of timing too, because we're getting really into the nitty-gritty details of things, that maybe you can move to your next question while Shem is looking at that, and perhaps Shem can also speak to the noise exhaust, like the purpose of those noise exhausts that are identified on the plans as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
But maybe you can move to your next question, and because I know your questions were very specific, right? So I think just in the interest of time to go through all of them specifically, it's going to take them a bit of time to look at them. So maybe you can move to your next question. Maybe it's not so specific to the drawings, but if it is, Shem,
No,
hopefully Shem
they're
can look
not.
at it.
Okay.
Okay.
But it was the reason why I am questioning the drawings is because of the traffic along Galileo and the potential traffic. So whether the developer is considering a second entrance or egress of some sort along Galileo, that would affect us. And in speaking to that, the fire route, is that Bernard Place, Bertrand, the main access on Galileo, Bertrand Place?
Correct.
Is that okay? So we do have a fire route there, and so we have since these homes have been built and developed since 1996. Both my parents and I, this home has been in our family since that time. We've enjoyed the visitor parking along both the north and south of Galileo. What is a concern for me is that parking will be taken away in relation to keeping fire routes clear. So that is a question for the city, not for the developer, but also in relation to the parking is reduced within the development. And if in fact this development is intended to be an upscale development or upscale homes, then people that have a higher income rather than a mid-level income generally have 2 vehicles. So it and some toys. But so is that parking going to overflow onto our street, and thereby we will have frustrated residents, namely definitely me, and no room for our own visitors?
So I'll take maybe the first response, and then perhaps Nancy, maybe you can speak to how parking is going to be arranged in this sort of situation, seeing that it is a rental development, or maybe the owners actually might be able to speak to that better, just because they've obviously have familiarity with these sort of projects. But to answer your question on the parking side of things, I mean, when it relates to zoning, we can only establish what a minimum ratio is, right? And so, logically, if there's overflow, there's times where, yeah, that may, spill onto city streets. But I think, what the owner is going to say is probably going to maybe give you some idea as to how that is arranged and how is it controlled, because a lot of it is self-policing itself, right? I mean, typically that's the case with condos, and it is the case with rentals too. So maybe Mike, I see your hands up. Do you want to maybe speak to how parking is controlled in your proposal or in the rental proposal?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jeff. So I'm the developer on the project with our partners here. We do a number of what we like to call the luxury rentals across Ontario. And we've realized that in this market, actually, there is a less of a one-to-one parking for a resident. And what we also encourage, which this project will have, is we have bike sharing, car sharing services, and an increase on the bus route. What we also do is we set a certain amount of visitor parking for our residents. And then we also have, everyone will have a key fob for their own specific parking spot. You have to sign in your resident and your own spot for parking. And we do encourage them to stay off kind of the public streets, especially for overnight parking. This has kind of worked out very well in other municipalities, and we're kind of excited to see this happen in Brantford.
Thank you, Michael. Jeff, that question is a high concern for me, that because of the traffic and because of the main entrance and because of the fire routes and the fire route associated with the main entrance and the development, that the city will eliminate the parking. On Galileo.
So leave that with me. I'll definitely look into that a bit more. So with respect to the fire route, that is a building code requirement, right? And there's standards in terms of how far you have to be from, your connections for your sprinkler systems, private fire hydrants, and things like that. So, I don't think there's any mechanism to say it has to go versus West Street versus Galileo. I mean, it's pretty prescribed that what's being proposed right now, the main entrance is off of Galileo. However, I will look into the on-street parking situation with respect to what does that do to the current situation. I know you identified a few questions about that, and as part of the rezoning, city staff don't typically get into the specifics as to changing how parking is arranged on the street. However, city council can bring forward motions that look at that, whether it be any of the councillors in attendance here, because I know the parking arrangement right now, as it stands, is there's no permit parking on Galileo. And correct me if I'm wrong, Susan, because you live there, but from my understanding, just going to the street, is that there's limitations. You have to park on one side of the street for part of the month, and then the other side of the street for the other part of the month, right?
Yeah.
So some of your questions I know spoke to that, and I will provide a response to you. And
okay.
But at this point, there doesn't appear to be any changes being proposed to the current on-street parking arrangement on Galileo. I can tell you that. Like that doesn't usually come through a rezoning, but it can come through a council meeting, for example. And those are things we can obviously look into as well. So I do have some contacts at the city that are looking into operations and how it currently operates. And I know you had a question too about signalization, and that's kind of feeds into that discussion as well, where how is the signalization controlled at the intersection of West and Galileo, and going to try to get an answer for you on that one as well. So maybe, I don't know, Nancy or the owners, if you have anything in addition to how parking's arranged, or maybe Susan, if you want to maybe move on to your next questions, we can do that as well.
Oh,
I don't know if we answered everything for you right now, but
no, but thank you for trying. And we'll wait for a response from the city. One of my questions also was relating to the speed along the street, and whether we don't need to discuss this right now as it relates to zoning, but was to potentially decrease the speed to 40 kilometers an hour, considering the increased pedestrian traffic, the main entrance and exit on Galileo, as well as the children's, because of the children's park that's located at the cul-de-sac. There is a tendency to speed along the street, and that may be taken into consideration with the timing of the traffic lights at the West and Galileo. But that question did not come from me. I do believe it did come from one of the other owners, but that's fine. My other questions related are directed towards the developer, and they are directed, they do concern the aesthetics of the tower, whereby we would be, and that would be the building number 3 and their south elevation. So does the developer also become the property manager? And if so, in these luxury tenancies, and I'm sure the developer has, as indicated, has built in other areas and in other cities. So what concerns me is that storage would be allowed on those beautifully designed balconies, and that barbecues would be permitted. It would look messy, and that the exterior facing window coverings wouldn't be consistent. There would be different colors. It may not be important to others as it is important to me, because that relates to the aesthetics. I want to walk out of my house and not see, like, you know, a blue drapes or something along those lines. So what is the process or the intent for property management?
No, thanks, Susan. So it's Michael here again. We manage all of our properties, and we do that so that we can keep, you know, the nice, consistent feel there. We think it's very important that we manage our properties to make sure that they stay up to the standards that we set. While we do try at all of our projects, actually we supply the blinds and the drapery in all of our units. We do that for a consistent look on the outside. We do have some tenants that do change them, and you know, that's their own right. But we very much try and keep the consistent look and the consistent feel. We manage our own buildings. We feel you, but we take pride in the buildings as well. And I hope if you know, took the time to look at some of our other projects, you'd realize we really do care what they look like.
Okay, thank you for that. It's somewhat reassuring. Thank you. In relation to the aesthetics of that. The other questions relate to the construction, the proximity of building 3 to the property line and the sidewalks, and the requirement for shoring for the excavation with 2-level underground, and how that relates to the foundations of our own homes with the installation of potentially shoring. I'm not sure what the intent is there for construction, but we absolutely do want inspections on our foundations. And that's like, for me with parking and that's like a no-go. It has to be done.
I think, yes, I think you're correct, Susan. I think the ownership is willing to do that, as I understand it. Michael can correct me if I'm wrong, but sort of a before and after to see the state of your home, the condition of your foundations before and after. So see what if there is a change, what may have caused that. The building itself, building number 3, is set back 7.5 meters from the property line, and that's of course, set back from the sidewalk and Galileo Boulevard. So there's 7.5 meters is a fair distance to where of course the excavation would probably spill over a bit into that setback. So other than that, I think despite the distance between this building 3 and your foundations, I think the owner is willing to undertake that survey for you.
That would be great. We can get into that, and I guess as the development comes closer to the construction stage, and just generally speaking, what is the intent, the start date, the finish date, is the project being phased? That is just out of interest.
Yes, we discussed that, and as I understand it, I mean, the owners want to get going as quickly as possible, run the rezoning and the site plan submission to try to commence construction in 2022, as I understand it. So, and it's my understanding that they'll build consecutively. There won't be, I do not believe, large periods of times between each building. One will be completed, the next building will be started. So that's all I can say about it. Maybe Michael can entertain more specific timelines, but I think it's not to phase it.
Yeah, I can kind of shed a little bit of light on here for you, Susan. The plan is to commence construction sooner rather than later. I think everyone knows the current housing situation. And the idea here is to basically just kind of keep building and building down to Galileo. So we'll start with 1, finish that, go on to building 2, and then go on to building 3. We hope by kind of keeping that approach of 1, 2, and 3, we can keep part of the site. We can keep a lot of the site clean and only focus on the one part for construction and kind of build that from the top down to Galileo. And just the point that Nancy did talk to earlier, we do offer any of our neighbors, adjacent neighbors to our projects, that we will undertake a building condition report for them, just to give them the extra comfort.
Okay, thank you so much. And just with that, I do have other questions, but they were sent to the city of Brantford, and maybe I should give somebody else an opportunity. And I just wanted to say thank you and welcome to the neighborhood.
Thanks, Susan. Yes, we will. I know you did provide obviously an email with a number of questions, a lot of them very technical in nature. I'm going to bring Shem, the architect. Perhaps he can just speak. He did write some notes in the chat. If I don't know if you're able to see them or not, Susan, but perhaps Shem, quickly, if you could just speak to some of the stuff that Susan was asking of earlier, please and thank you.
Yes, no problem, of course. So with the first question regarding what appears to be a doorway on grid line 22 there, it's actually, it's not a doorway, but it's actually in fact opening to another doorway. It is for access to the underground. So what we've done, we've actually recessed the overhead door to the ramp further into the building. So you don't see it, and one is also for noise. So we've been able to kind of have the building kind of straddle that portion of the site, and then we recessed a door in there, so it's you don't see it, you don't hear it, and it just looks nothing more just a pass through and that elevation, right? The air shaft, typically air shafts they kind of serve two purposes. One is an intake and one is an exhaust. Typically the intakes do not have fans on them. So if it's just an open shaft, it's essentially connected to the underground, and it obviously has a grating so nobody falls down, and etc. And then the exhaust one is the one that has the fan. But that fan typically is located in the underground. So it's not at the surface where you're going to hear like an air conditioner or anything like that. It's going to be in the underground, and it's going to be pushing air up and out into the sky, essentially, right? So our air shafts, they're always located in opposite ends of the underground. So we have the ability to actually locate our exhaust shaft, which is the ones that have the fan, away from the single-family homes where the bees, where they could have some impact. Typically, the fans that are available in today's market are very quiet. They're not the ones that you get, you hear the 1970s condos that sound like an airplane taking off. So they're much quieter.
Exactly.
Sorry? Oh,
exactly. The 1970s condos.
That's right. You don't get that, right? So and they don't run the whole time. They only run when the CO2 levels in the exhaust hit a certain level. They exhaust for 10, 15 minutes periodically, and then they shut off, right? So it's not something that's going to be constantly humming that you're hearing and have essentially you probably won't even notice it when they do turn on, even when you're walking down the street, walking your dog, right?
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Shem. Susan, perhaps before we go to another panelist, is there anything else? Like I said, we will be responding to your email with some of the specifics that you were asking. We'll definitely do that. But if there's anything else, there's still an opportunity to ask.
Yeah, it didn't relate to, well, maybe it does. It just the one relating to the proposed hours of construction, whether it would be, 7 a.m. till 4, 7 till 5, whether there would be, in fact, weekend work once the construction was off schedule, because we know that always happens, unfortunately, and the implications as it relates to the bylaws. So that is pertinent to us. Our neighbors, myself, we absolutely enjoy our backyards and the quiet on the weekends. So.
No, that's a great question. So, in terms of some of the construction stuff, maybe perhaps Dan or Mike can speak to it, but with respect to the question, from the city's perspective, the city does have different types of bylaws that look at noise. Hours of operation for construction projects, they're pretty defined. There are situations where, contractors can ask for exemptions to those, but there are typically set rules in place with most municipalities in terms of what's an acceptable time frame to be doing construction. And I can probably tell you it's not going to be at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I think typically I'd have to confirm the specifics in the city's bylaw, but typically it's between, I want to say 6 or 7 a.m. up to 9 p.m. approximately. There's a bit of a range, but I'll get an answer for you on that. But maybe, I don't know if Dan or Mike, if you, like in your experience in other projects, how construction projects go.
Yeah, no, we can definitely jump in. Thanks, Jeff. If the bylaw may be from 6 till 9, I can tell you our crews and team don't want to be there from 6 till 9.
No.
Generally, and the projects we are working on right now, the general hours of our operations is kind of 7 till about 3:34. Susan, it does fluctuate depending if you're kind of in a crunch time or you're not. The nice part I will say though is the crunch time usually happens once you get inside the building, and at that point, the noise, you won't hear very much of the noise, if at all, once they start going around the insides of the buildings.
Okay, thank you. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Susan. And if there's any other questions that you think of, maybe perhaps, later this evening, you have my email, so you're more than welcome to send me an email, and we'll, like I said, we'll try to get answers for some of those other questions. So thank you. So maybe with that, Darlene, perhaps we can move on to one of the other attendees that have registered for this evening. Please and thank you.
Great, thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Susan. Vanessa, do you have any questions you'd like to ask?
Nope, she covered every question that I had, so thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Next on our attendees is Dawn. Do you have any questions for us, Dawn? She just has to turn her microphone on. Dawn,
Hello.
can you hear us? Hi. Go ahead
Hi.
with your question.
Oh, well, I have several too. Mine are going to pertain mainly to the zoning bylaw change. We have about 100 people in the Galileo complex of West Glen. We are a mix of geared to income and low income housing. We are family oriented here, and we are very concerned about mainly the traffic and the noise. We're not completely opposed to the development of that land, though we would like to see it more in line with the single family homes, maybe a townhouse complex, and not that kind of extreme high density in this area. I don't think that this area can support it. Again, as Mr. Carpenter had stated, West Street is very busy. And if you're a pedestrian, it's dangerous. Adding more traffic to that street and blind spots up the hill. We've had a couple of accidents. I've had a couple of close calls being hit as a pedestrian crossing West Street when that light is horrible. It lasts for like seconds. It's already flashing red as soon as you press the button to cross, as soon as it shows up. There's a lot of issues with a high density down here. As far as the noise is considered, I don't think people realize, unless you live here, that where this complex is, the West Glen Co-op, it's an amphitheater. We are surrounded by trees, and any noise come from anywhere, it echoes and it bounces around. It is going to be extremely disruptive to pretty much every resident that's in here with any kind of construction, with a new number of people, and the noises that people just make on a regular basis. The fact that these buildings are going to be looking right into our units. So from the 37 block to the 41 are all basically facing building number 3. So the parking here is already, well, we need more parking just in these units. And I understand the surveys that were done, or as far as the 1.1 for the units. But as we know here, even in a geared to income or a low income or a mid income range, there are many residents here with 2 cars. I cannot fathom a luxury unit with a higher income family not having more than 1 vehicle. The bus routes, that bus route that was shown earlier, that's 1 route. That's not actually 3 different buses. That's one bus every half hour in either direction. My youngest is in high school, and that bus in the morning is packed, absolutely packed. There is no room to move. And during COVID, it's kind of scary, obviously, but that's the only way. The only way to get really to where they're going. So let's just say it's either Tollgate or North Park or any of the high schools up in that area. They have to go downtown. That bus does not go up to that area at all, unless you transfer from the Linden Park Mall. So that would be a huge issue that the city would really need to consider. I don't see the city proposing more bus routes at this point in time. Like, so every 15 minutes. So I think that the whole concept of that being feasible from the developer's point of view, it's really not. Unless you live here and know the area, I don't think that they can really see the kind of impact it's going to have on all of the residents around here. So we have a lot of families and a lot of the young families. So there's a lot of kids. The park that was pointed out earlier is, what's it called again? I live right across the street from it.
Arctic Park. Is it
Arctic Park? Yeah, I always forget. It's tiny. It's a tiny little park. And if this is the park that the residents in these units are going to be using, that park cannot by any means sustain more than what is already there right now. It is tiny. It is so small. And the fact that there's a lot of children here, again, with the traffic that's going to come into play. Again, lots of people speed down that street. And maybe they're going to miss the apartment complex when they come down Galileo. So where are they going to go? They're going to come up in here. And it's not a throughway. As soon as you come to the end, there's the entrance to the co-op. And then it comes around and it exits. So I can see people speeding through thinking it's through, and then coming through speeding or whatever, and possibly hitting a kid or a disabled resident or myself or my kid or a neighbor. There's been a couple of incidents with people, even as is right now, without a development there, that do come in because they think this is right through and they do speed. So again, like I said, there's over 100 residents here already. There's probably about, I think it's like 40, 50 units. And the congestion, I think, especially down on West Street, would be overwhelming. The street doesn't get plowed right away. And even just trying to get onto West Street after these snowstorms, it was almost impossible. You'd have to, because a pile of snow right there. My other questions are mainly with the ecology of the area, not so much environmental assessments, like the groundwater and stuff. I'm more concerned about the nature that's here. We have several species of migrating birds. We have red-tailed hawks. We have falcons. There's deer. There's skunks. There's coyotes. You name it, it's in here. It's very, very diverse. Because that land had been left alone for so long, it's regenerated. There are monarch butterflies that use that area because there's the milkweed. And I'm not sure what else is in there exactly, but I think, would it be possible to have an ecological study done? Is my question. Hello?
Jeff, do you want me to take that? I don't.
Yeah,
I mean,
yes,
that's
please. If you could-
primarily.
I'm just writing some notes. Sorry, I apologize. Maybe perhaps you can answer that, Nancy, or speak to some of that stuff.
Well, I can only. Well, I'm going to start with the last part with the environmental impact study. I suppose that was not requested of us as part of this rezoning. There's a list of studies that have to be done, and the environmental impact assessment was not one of them. We did do a tree management plan. GSP landscape architects went out and with trees of a certain diameter at breast height, they measure them, they tag them, they survey them. And so they know, obviously a number of trees are going to be removed for this proposed development, But what I recall, the tree management plan said about 38% could be retained. And I think that's primarily around the perimeter and perhaps some interior. I don't, I understand that there's a lot, there is a wood law or woodlands in there, and that, you know, there could be some species. So that's all I can say at this point, because we've not been asked to do that. And that's something the city would have to request.
Yeah, so this is what I'm asking, is if the city could request that being done, because I understand it wasn't triggered automatically. The woodlands that are behind our units here and behind the single family homes down the street towards West Street, that's protected already.
Yeah.
Because of the cottonwood, I believe. And there, I don't know exactly what's in the woodlot next to the site. But I know I've seen trillium plants. I know I've seen other things like that in there, that it would be a total disaster, I think, ecologically. Yeah, so like there's not a lot of green space, and I do understand the need for housing, but our need for housing isn't luxury apartments. Our need for housing is a mid-range, lower income housing. That's what we need. Honestly, like those are the people that we need to house. That is the issue that the city itself is facing right now. So would there be a compromise to change that to a mid-range?
I can answer that question right now, Dawn, but again, we'll take that back and under consideration. And I don't know if Michael has anything to say on that, but you know, this is the type of proposal. The rental, I guess, is the rental housing is also needed, and there will be a component that's affordable for mid-income families or households. So that's the proposal right now, and I don't know that that's going to change, but certainly Michael can comment.
Sorry, what would the number of units set aside for that mid affordable area?
So yeah, I can kind of jump in here a little bit, Nancy.
Thank
John,
you.
your questions are fantastic. Currently, we actually have a 20% affordable component with this project. Affordable comes in different aspects. As a whole for this project, we are looking for a 20% total affordable component. On your question about kind of the luxury rentals, or the higher end rentals, I do appreciate with you that there's a need for maybe the more affordable housing, but I also believe there is there's an effect when you still bring any rental product online. We do have a significant amount of rental product in Brantford that we currently own. And then we feel, we've even seen it as we've brought on some new product. You do see the trickle down effect where more product becomes online, more product comes online further down the market, and it does help the market as a whole.
Okay. So again, if this development was to go through, obviously there's not a lot of green space that's going to be available for the residents there. Was it projected that they would come down to the Arctic Park?
Yeah, so we are working with the city to see if there's a way that we can work to enhance the Arctic Park. We've had discussions with them, and they've been very encouraging about it. If there's a way that we can make that park, because it is actually up to be revitalized.
Yeah, I think it's another couple of years though away.
Yeah. So what we are working with them to see if we can make it better. But on this site too, this is a pretty large site. The idea, if you can see between building 1 and building 2, there will actually be quite a large green space that we are looking to develop there for the residents. This is an over 4-acre site. There should be a significant amount of space on this.
Yeah, and I understand. So the parking is a huge issue that we think that we're going to have, since we already have it here. we can see that it's going to be an issue there as well, especially the street parking, because we do have residents here as well as Susan, who use the street for parking. We have people who have, you know, their company trucks or whatever, and some of them park in here, and sometimes they have to park out on the street. A resident who drives cab, he has to park out on the street. There's not a lot here. Our visitor parking is used constantly, mostly by some tenants and their guests. And I can't see that there's going to be any room for that amount of people. And even with the proposed, like, even if it was true that it was like a 1-to-1, 1.1 ratio there, their guests, like their guest parking is like, that's not, I don't think that's enough, not near enough for the amount of units that are proposed. If it was scaled back, possibly. But again, I think we'd really like to see a study as far as the ecology that's first. I mean, this is quiet. It is so quiet in here. I mean, I can hear traffic from the highway. I can hear traffic down West Street. I can hear the birds, like all of them. Seriously, there's so many. And since the pandemic's happened, you know, we can't really go anywhere. We can't really do anything. So I've been sitting outside just enjoying what's here. And I think myself and a lot of the residents would really hate to lose that. Especially given the noise. Like I said, this is an echo chamber. It just bounces around. I can hear people talking like almost at the other side of the complex sometimes. That's how quiet it is. So we're really concerned about the noise. We're really concerned about the traffic. We're also concerned about any city planning for the sewage, because we already have issues up here at this end of the street. Like there are issues with the water and the sewage, and things don't move like they should. So is that going to be fixed for every resident down here along the entire stretch of Galileo?
In terms of issues with the sewage, like what specifically issues are you guys currently experiencing? Because I mean, there's obviously detailed engineering that goes into this review with respect to, you know, how this development will be serviced, but you know, there's also service reports that have been completed. So I'm just taking some notes. I'm just curious if you can maybe explain a little bit more.
So there are quite a few units, right? This area was built in the early 80s, these units. So basically all of that is from the 80s. Anything that was done previously is from then. So the units are also old, and our plumbing inside these units are older. I know that there's some tree roots and stuff that are starting to kind of invade. And you know, there's lots of backups, there's lots of, it's slow and that kind of thing. And I don't know exactly if it's the complex itself, the units, and each of the individual homes. But I think that it should be addressed to see where it's coming from, if the city, if it's part of the city's what they need to develop or to do to fix it.
I mean, I'm not an engineer or plumber by any means. I mean, it you know, it sounds like it could be an issue with, you know, perhaps the individual units. It could be the issue from how that complex is serviced. Correct me if I'm wrong, but your site is on a hill, right? And then it drops as you get down towards West Street. Am I right on that in terms of like the topography? Because
yeah, we have units that are up a bit on the hill that are elevated.
Okay.
And then that's only one set of buildings, and the rest of them are all
okay. I'll definitely, you know, speak to our engineers about that. Like typically sanitary sewers in a lot of cases, it's gravity fed, right? So if you're at the top of the hill and you're flushing, in theory, it's going to go down the hill, right? That's kind of how wastewater works in most cases. So that's why it makes me think that it might be an issue at the source, but I don't know if your complex has looked into that, but I'm just throwing some ideas out there, but I have taken some notes, and I'll speak to my colleagues in engineering.
Well, I'm not the manager. I'm a board member.
Okay.
I do know that we did have somebody in here not too long ago, and I'm not sure of all the details. I can just say to the fact that I think that with that amount of people also flushing, it's going to create some sort of issue back down here.
Fair enough. No, I appreciate that input. I mean, that's why we're having this meeting, is to get that sort of feedback. So your question on your comments on the ecology, we'll look at that in a bit more detail. I know, Don, you and I spoke. Typically there's trigger mechanisms as to when municipalities ask for certain studies and plans. So things like environmental reports, typically there has to be a much larger, most cases environmental features. In a lot of areas of the city, like especially in some of the new areas, we have something called natural heritage systems, and those are very large environmental features that extend from properties. There's certain compositions of features that are there, whether it be a provincially significant wetland, different other types of ecology, stuff like that. And that's usually a mechanism that, policy that we would have to ask for an environmental report, not disputing the ecology aspect that you're referring to, but that would be one of the reasons why, I believe why staff haven't asked for any environmental reports, but we can look at it in a bit more detail. And after this meeting, obviously speak to the developer and their team about, the need for that sort of report or investigation of that report.
It's the disruption that it's going to cause to some of the critters and the birds and stuff, especially the falcons and the red-tailed hawks that use that area for a feeding ground. And I know that the birds themselves are protected and their nests are protected, but not necessarily the surrounding areas. But it still seems like a huge disadvantage to the wildlife that's here. Even if it's a small area, it's still an area that they take in back, and that they, that's theirs now. I think I don't want to mess with it. I really enjoy it, and I think a lot of the residents here enjoy it too. Like, I have a neighbor who likes to photograph the falcon that he sees on one of the rooftops over behind us. It just, to me, it's like such a waste. I mean, if you could have some single family homes in there, it might not be as much of a disruption to what is around here already. And it just a large 3 buildings is a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot for this area, period. It's just in every single aspect, it's just too much. That was the consensus of the board.
Okay. No, thank you for that. I mean, it's good input, and I mean, we appreciate that input. I see that Councillor Toski has her hand up. Perhaps you want to speak to this topic?
I just have a question in terms of process, Jeff. So I'm hearing that an EA isn't triggered, for this kind of development. Is there anything stopping a request or a councillor bringing forward a notice to request it? Are there other avenues to address that?
I mean, that's a possibility. I mean, it still could be something that, I mean, the applicants are here. They could, agree to look into it in a bit more detail. It sounds like there has been some environmental work that's been done to date with respect to more so tree cover and analyzing that, but not so much more on the ecology side of things. So, but that could be very well something that could be requested, regardless of what the official plan policy says.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff, I just had a comment, maybe something helpful for Dawn. She mentioned that some of the sewer problems could be site specific, and just in some of my previous work dealing with CHF Canada, the Co-op Housing Federation, Dawn, you're probably aware of it. They have access to the preservation funding from the federal government that helps pay for all those building condition assessments and reports.
Mm-hmm.
So this could be something that going through CHF Canada and their kind of asset management plan, they could pay for those reports through some federal funding.
I think I'm not sure. I missed the last couple of board meetings. But I did speak to the manager, and she did mention that. So I'm not sure if it's already been done or if it's been requested and we're just waiting. Not entirely sure where we're at with that. So I am hoping that we have another community meeting or two, so we can. I didn't have a chance to actually get around to all of the members here, so we're hoping that we can actually have more discussions with them. So we didn't have a community meeting. We're not actually scheduled one for another couple of months, so we're hoping that we have a little bit more time to have some discussions with our community here.
You know, John, thank you. If I could just kind of say one last point. We're happy to sit down with you and your board as well. You know, the idea is hopefully we're neighbors. We want to be good neighbors. So if you ever do want to sit down and reach out to us, please feel free.
Thank you.
I have some friends who live in your community. Actually.
Oh, great.
I know it quite well.
Great, thank you, Dawn. Do you have any more questions for us?
Oh, gee, probably. But I have this bad brain fog thing. So not at the moment. Hopefully there'll be another community meeting and we can discuss further. So
Great,
thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Our last attendee I see is Diane. Diane, do you have any questions for us?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, Diane. Go ahead with your question.
I just my neighbor Sue, she I think she covered most of the questions that I have, but definitely, I mean, if this does go forward, one of the things that I'm really concerned with is if I've got a damaged foundation or roof, or you know, my house is filthy with construction dirt, my bricks, my shingles and things like that, is there going to be a cleanup to our homes after this is done, or are we just going to, you know, fend for ourselves kind of thing?
Yeah, I can kind of help on that. So like we said, for any of the direct neighbors, we offer what's called like a building condition report or a building assessment. They'll come in, they'll review before construction and then after. If there's any issues, we take responsibility for that. And that's the part of us coming up and doing the building condition.
Great, because I just thought, I mean, I have no idea, you know, what this is going to feel like, you know, when they're you know, putting the footings in and the things that they need to do. Because I'd read a report. Are you going to have to like sink footings or something down to the bedrock? You know, does that create a lot of vibration? You know, just answers like that. I think Sue addressed the air shaft, and Don had said, but yeah, I just want to really reinforce the stoplight at the end of the street. I have been taking Galileo to work for the last 12 and a half years, making a left-hand turn. Don's right. If you try and get across the road, you have possibly, you know, it's hard to get from one side to the other. And the frequency of the light, you sit at that stoplight for about a minute. If you're the third car, you're taking it around on a yellow. So, I mean, you know, if there was, you know, say we were all going to work in the morning and there was 10 cars waiting at that light, it would take that 10th car about 5 minutes or so to get through. So I would hope, you know, that if that does become an issue, that the city would look at fixing that problem.
So to answer that question, Diane, that, an existing condition like that, that's something we can definitely control. Like the city can control the timing of lights. There's usually little pads on, sometimes you see them on the actual hydro pole itself or the actual turning signals. So I have relayed some of there was actually a few members that had asked about that or provide those sort of comments. So we're speaking to our operations department about that. In addition to that too, like the traffic study that's still under review by the city would speak to some of those things, and those may be a means to address potential conflicts with, with queuing and things like that, right? So signalization is a component that's normally looked at for development applications like this.
Yeah, and I mean, like currently, you know what, like I said, I take that way to work every day. Sometimes it's excellent right around the corner. I think it would only be an issue if, there was lots of cars using it, but I just wanted to make sure that, that actually, I do have one other question to you. I was looking at the drawings. Now it said that building 3 does not have forced air vents for air conditioning. And buildings 1 and 2 have this forced air. Does that mean that building 3 is going to be like people will bring their own window air conditioner in?
Sorry, that works a little bit better. No, the type of window we use is called a window wall, which doesn't allow for those window type air conditioners.
Okay.
But no, it will have an interior. It will have a full system for the whole building.
Oh, perfect.
It's just a little bit different than building 1 and 2.
Okay, because I mean, when I read that, I thought, oh, it looks like a very attractive building. I thought that would, aesthetically appearance. And you know what I'm thinking too, like, I mean, I don't know that whirring noise. I mean, who knows? I might not even be able to hear it. I'm at 23 Galileo, so basically I'm about, just at the far east of the building. Yeah, and I thought, like, am I going to hear a constant whirring all the time? But that is good. That is good. So those basically those were the things that I wanted to address that weren't addressed prior in the meeting. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Diane. Jeff, that concludes our attendees list. If anyone else has any other follow-up question.
Maybe I see Councillor Martin has his hand up. Maybe we can go to Councillor Martin right now and go through the councillors if they have any questions for the team here.
Great.
Go ahead, Councillor. Yeah, my question is about the parking. We've seen this kind of reduction to the 1.5 in other things, and it's either been a problem or it's suspected it will be a problem. Do we have any projects built that are 1.1 for the parking completed that we can check to see if it is a problem in something that's built in Brantford?
So that's probably better suited for me. So to Councillor Martin, we have approved parking ratios of that nature in other sites. I'm trying to think if they've actually started construction yet. I'll have to get back to you, but I can definitely give you a list of comparable developments that have been built and constructed, so you can sort of see how they're functioning. And I can probably look back at least 5-6 years ago for you if that's acceptable.
Yeah, I'd like to see an example where it is 1.1, just to do have a look and see what the parking is like in that area. And to the developer, do you have a plan in mind that if you don't get the parking reduction to the 1.1, how are you going to accommodate 1.5? Well, have you calculated how many units you'll have to reduce by?
Yeah, so I can take it. Thank you, Councillor Martin. Yeah, no, we have, if there is a requirement for more parking, we have the ability to. We've just realized that actually through our projects that we own, the ones that we had built, a long number of years ago, we now have empty parking spaces. We have hired a parking consultant to do the parking tests in Brantford and other municipalities to see what the parking is and what the parking trend is. We do have a small project in Brantford that does have a 1-to-1 parking ratio, and quite often we actually have empty parking spots.
And where's that one?
It is in the downtown core, on Dalhousie and Peel, but it still has stayed with underneath the 1.1.
Okay. And how much underground parking is there with this project?
It has 2 stories of underground parking.
Would it be possible to put a 3rd story of underground parking?
Yeah, it absolutely would be possible. Our first step would actually be, we're not using the full site for underground parking. So the first step would be to increase the parking footprint.
Yeah.
To go from there.
Okay, because I agree. I agree with the people who think parking is going to be a problem. It's hard to imagine upscale apartments where a couple's not going to have 2 cars, or a car and a motorcycle, or car and a sports car, or a convertible, or who knows what. But to think that most of them are going to have one vehicle to allow parking for visitors, I think is a bit of a stretch. So yeah, that's my concern there. And as Jeff said, the lights at Galileo and West, obviously those can be adjusted if traffic is increased, because the main entrance for this complex is on Galileo. We'll have to take a look at those lights and lengthen the green for Galileo, and perhaps shorten the red for West Street to accommodate the increased traffic there. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor.
Jeff, I don't see any more hands. Any more questions?
Okay, maybe Councillor Carpenter or Councillor Antosky, thank you for attending. Is there any other questions, comments at this point?
And no, they've been addressed.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Carpenter. And I guess one last chance for folks that are on this attendees, if you want to talk, put your hand up. now's your opportunity. Otherwise, I think we could probably adjourn the meeting.
I'd just like to say thank you to staff and the proponents and all the residents who joined in. I think it's been a successful meeting, and it's been suggested we have another one, and I think that's a good idea. So once this project has moved along a little further and more of the details are fleshed out so that we can fully answer some of the questions, I think it'll be appropriate to have another meeting.
All right, thank you, Councillor Martin. Okay, I don't see any hands up, so let's